everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Head Over Heels. It's still January and we still have so many stories to tell. And this podcast has been on a journey to be on the lookout for voices that we feel needs to be amplified and, of course, stories that need to be heard. And today is no different. We happen to have one that needs your attention. Her name is Liyana and she's with me here today. Hi, Liyana. Could you just do a quick introduction of yourself?
Okay, well, my name is Liyana. I'm 32 this year, and I work within production as well.
And the reason why Liyana is here today is to talk about her story and her experiences being incarcerated a couple of years ago. Right. And of course, she's also going to be a part of this documentary called It's Time for Alternatives. And it talks about the underlying issues of our nation's judiciary system and the overcrowding of prisons and why it is an issue and why it is time for alternatives. Of course, if you guys want to know more about the documentary, it will be out on the 21st of January. If it's still not out by the time this episode is out, you guys can check out the details in the description down below. We will be linking it there for sure. But before we even dive in deeper about, the alternatives of overcrowding prison, the boys, Minghan and Mingyu, will actually also be talking to the director of this documentary, which they will be touching base on more of the technical stuff. But today, I really want to know about Liyana's personal story and her personal experience being a part of the system. So thank you so much for being here, Liyana.
Thanks for having me here.
You have got a very soothing voice, can I just say that? Okay, so I guess for our listeners who may not understand the difference or the meaning or the idea of incarceration versus imprisonment, are you able to just give us a quick debrief on that?
Well, what I understand is that imprisonment is after your sentencing and incarceration is while you're waiting for your trial, while you're still under remand. And
you were incarceration.
Correct.
Got it. So tell us, I guess we only see this in movies and pictures, listen to people's stories from afar, but never quite someone close to us. And people also kind of avoid talking about stuff like this. So what was life for you back in prison?
It definitely is a lot harder than what you actually see in movies. Maybe the human aspect of it is really lacking in our Malaysian prison systems.
Okay.
So, for example, when I arrived, I thought that I would have my own cell, just like in the movies.
Yeah.
Or maybe just one cellmate. But no, my first room had 12 cellmates inside when it was built for 4.
Okay.
And then it got a little bit better and then it was just down to 8. And then I got moved to a better room. Then it was 6 to a room. But it's still a room built for 4 that's overstuffed.
And how big are we talking about in terms of the space, if you are able to, in square foot roughly, like a square, like a little...
Yeah, like a little square, maybe from that door up to there, here. And that encompasses your bathroom as well as your sleeping
And there's how many of you again in there?
My last room only had 6 of us.
6 of you. But it's still quite
it's still
a tight
overcrowded.
Space. Yeah. And if you don't mind sharing with us, how did it happen? How did you end up being in prison for incarceration?
Well, I was charged with Section 39B, bracket 2.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened was I was in possession of some marijuana that I smoked during my leisure times, after work, before sleep, those kind of things. And I didn't know at that time that it was such a big crime that I would be sentenced possibly to death for this.
Okay.
So it was in the morning, the cops came and they found the stuff and I was charged with it.
And right away you were put in prison?
My first week, I was at a place called Lockup Berpusat, where this is, I guess, where they house us before we get sent into prison. Yeah.
Okay. I recently watched a show called The Unforgivable. I'm not sure if you've seen it. Sandra Bullock
No,
starring.
I've not watched it
Right.
yet.
It's basically, that's my closest understanding to when it comes to imprisonment, what it's like life after imprisonment as well. It's about this woman called Ruth Slater, which obviously is played by Sandra Bullock. And so recently I watched it and then I was told that I were to do this episode, and I thought, okay, it is so timely because it's basically about a woman that was released from prison after serving a sentence. Like she was sentenced for a violent crime, and she attempts to re-enter society, but just that transition to re-enter society was so hard for her to just put her life back together. So maybe just curious, before we even dive deeper into your experiences in prison, was it hard for you to re-enter society after you were released? Because you were incarcerated for how long again?
For 2 years.
That's really long time.
Almost 2 years.
That's a really long time. Yeah. Did you have any struggles after being released?
Honestly, I think getting back into society was harder than living through prison life.
No way.
Yeah, because in a sense, like you sort of lost everything. So you had to start back again. And what I found most challenging was trying to reconnect with my friends, and just speaking to people in general was a hard thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you mind sharing how, like, what kind of hard are we talking about? Like they completely ignore you or like dismiss your
I think
experience?
People were gracious, but it was more of a conscious thing that I went through, and then you sort of question yourself, like, am I a really good person, and are people gonna accept me for what happened? Yeah. So that was tough. And then mentally as well, I was not so there. For example, I would do mindless things, so I guess it took a toll on me, on my mental self, but I tried to just like not pay attention and just push forward.
Can I just say you are so strong, and the fact that you're here having to relieve those experiences, I just want to say I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Because we're going to dive deeper like now. Are you okay to talk about them? Okay. So perhaps you can talk to us about, like you said, your time in prison was difficult, and it's really not as easy or as simple as what was depicted in movies and shows that we watch. So what were some of the things that kind of threw you off? Like, oh my gosh, I didn't know I have to go through this. Yeah.
For one is the fact that when you enter, you're strip searched, but you're strip searched 3 times on the way. And while that's going on, it's very demeaning because they would make comments on your body or how you look like. So that was the one I was like, is this even allowed? Can you speak to someone like this? So that was one. Second was when I arrived in a room and I found out there's no running water in our cells. So we have an allocation of one, like, you know, the big black dustbin that you use at home. So just one of the big things for half a day. So we get two tongs of water a day. So that will be for you to shower, use the bathroom, wash your utensils.
Even to flush the water?
Yeah, even to flush the water. So what we have to do, which is really gross, is use the bathroom in back-to-back terms. So if no one else wants to go, you have to hold it until everyone wants to go, so that we don't waste water flushing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was the communication like with your cellmates about that? Like, you just say you're not...
When I arrived, they just explained to me what the rules were, the ground rules in the room was. And then we do this thing called master hidong. That means I need to use the bathroom number 2.
Okay.
So when someone says that, and then everyone agrees that we're going to go, and then we use the bathroom.
Yeah, and you said that everything was in the space and it's like an open space. So everybody can see everything that you're going through.
Yeah.
Right.
There isn't like a blocked space for you in the bathroom. And it's like the old school sit-down changkong toilet. So everyone sees everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
But what about, because we're all women, like you were in a women prison, right?
Correct.
What about when you had your period? Were there like, I don't know, this was just one thing I always wondered, like necessary sanitary pad supplies, were they given, or like they just let you, I don't know, what was that like?
You get visits. So when your family visits, and if you're fortunate enough to have your family visit, then they'll buy you pads.
Oh, right.
But if you don't, then you'll be at the mercy of the officers that take care of the prison. So you won't be given like 3 pads a day, which is the basic one I think every woman would agree with. So you probably get like 5 pads to last your whole period.
Oh my God.
So what they would do is they would tear up the pads and turn it into tampons. They tear up the pads and then use use the benang from your baju and then tie it up, and then
Wow. And did you do that? Or
fortunately, my parents visited, so
thank goodness.
so I got
But that happens to the women in there who
the majority of them. That's what they have to go through.
And were there any pregnant women in the cells?
Yeah,
and
there are pregnant women in the cells.
Were they with you in your cell?
Before I moved cell, so my first cell with the cramped up people was the pregnant room.
Ah, okay.
So at that time, they said that the clinic in the hospital is full already. So that's usually where after they give birth, then they get to move to the clinics. So before that, they'll still be in the cell going through the same thing as the rest of us. But they only get additional 10 biscuits a day.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So they don't get the nutrition that they need for their baby as well.
They're fed the same thing that everyone else eats.
Biscuits.
Biscuits, rice, but they just get that additional 10 biscuits, which is for their hunger pens, I guess.
This is so hard to hear. Wow. Okay. This is very obviously very new to all of us here in this room.
Right.
Okay. Well, apart from all of that, what about activities? Like, what is life like in prison? Like, what do you do? Like, I'm very curious. Like, what do you do? Do you just sit there and wait for time to eat, time to, I don't know. Yeah.
Well, you guessed it right.
Yeah.
We just sit in our cells. Well, there will be about 8 people who are allowed to come out of their cells, and that's only to do the chores around prison or to basically run our floor or our building. So the people who get to work while they're under remand, we help the officers do head counts. We'll be doing the water, carrying the water up, food shifts, carrying the food in and distributing the food. So that's all you get to do. But for the rest of them that are not allowed to come out, and this is only 6 people out of like hundreds of us on the floor.
Yeah.
So the rest of them will just have to sit in their cell all day. So you'll be fortunate if someone lends you a book that's of most value inside.
Because we're talking about 2 years.
Yeah.
A 2 whole year. I mean, for you, it was 2 years. I don't know about the other inmates. Do you call them
everyone else that was under remand?
Yeah, everyone else that was under remand. I don't know how long they were under remand for. And if you don't mind sharing, or if you are allowed to share, what kind of crimes were there?
I think it was a mix, but majority of them was non-violent crimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's quite sad that they had to.
It's really sad. I mean, I'm kind of like at loss of words right now, guys. Sorry. But did you have conversations with your friends in prison? Like, and what was the mental state like for you guys? Did you guys have each other to lean on, or like everyone was just kind of like trying to survive in their own?
It's a little bit of both.
Okay.
You kind of do need your friends and usually stick to your cellmates. But naturally, I guess you're not in a safe space. So there's a lot of people that you also have to watch your back for.
Yeah. And I guess in movies, you see people kind of like bullying each other in prison. Was that the case for you when you were in there?
Okay, the bullying part wasn't as intense as what we see in movies. It's more like, no, I'm not going to give you this book because I don't like you.
Okay, so it does happen.
Yeah, but it does happen.
Did you experience any of it personally?
I did, and it was me not wanting to share my stuff, my food, and because
of course, like I
don't know if my parents are going to come next weekend. Like it's
I mean, it's kind of like you're in your own world, and you got to just survive whatever it takes, right? Because you just don't know when the next time you're going to get that little that piece of biscuit or that pad that you will need yourself. And if you were to give it to someone else, then what about yourself? Because you won't, it's not like the outside world where you can just, it's all right, you can have it, I'll go buy it myself.
Yeah.
Right? So in some ways you are kind of forced to also be selfish to protect yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, let's talk about your mental well-being. Like then like what was the hardest for you? Waiting on when did you know when you will be released, or you was really waited? You waited for 2 whole years.
Yeah. So what would happen is we go to court like maybe every 1 or 2 months
Okay.
for the judge to tell us our case has been postponed again for the next 2 months. But those were actually little good things, because that would mean I still get to go out and see my family, because they'll always come whenever there's a hearing, although I'll get postponed. So that's a little relief. But throughout, it was hard not knowing when my exact date was. Yeah.
And at the time you mentioned, this was quite a while ago, 6 years ago.
Correct,
you
6 years
mentioned.
ago,
So
yeah.
that was in 20. Were you in school then, or
No, I
you
was
were
out.
like
I was
already
working
in,
already.
working?
Yeah.
Okay, and like what was did your boss then, were
Yeah.
they like supportive of?
My boss then is still my boss now. So
Wow.
I'm very
Okay.
grateful that he's okay with me, and he knows what has happened.
I love that.
And he doesn't hold it against me. So
That's so awesome.
I'm blessed.
So good that you have a boss like that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a happy note there to know. Hi, Liyana's boss. You're awesome.
Thanks, boss.
Yeah, I think things like this are so important. Like, even if you were in prison, you're still human.
Right.
And the fact that you guys were incarcerated for very minor crimes, or kind of like one of those things where you did the wrong thing at the wrong time, being caught at the wrong time, and then that's it. Like years of your lives are taken away. Am I right?
Yeah.
So, then for you, Liyana, I am very curious. How did you overcome, or if you are still overcoming those traumatic experiences when you were in prison?
I think I'm more fortunate than I can say for the rest of my friends or people that I know who were inside, because I've had a good and strong support system within my family and friends. So it was tough in the beginning. I wasn't all there, like, as I maybe mentioned before, like I do mindless things, like I walk home and start undressing and then only realize that what has happened? Okay, so it was mindless things like that, but it took me about 2 years to slowly, fully get better. But it was because I had a good support system.
Yeah. I think having a support system is so important. I think we talked about this in a lot of our episodes on the podcast, that having that pillar of strength makes a ton of difference. But unfortunately, not everyone has that support system. And well, my next question really actually is, I think we didn't touch this earlier, like the officers, like what kind of treatment did you receive, and what kind of treatments did the others receive? And were there any horror stories that you witnessed yourself in there while you're still in prison?
Obviously, with every group of people, there's the good, there's the bad.
Yeah.
So some of them were nice and made friends with us and were as gracious as they could be. I was allowed to work in the library, or rather, I reopened the library when I was there. I made my parents donate a bunch of books, so they sort of like, okay, fine, you can work in the library. So we worked in the library, but the bad ones was they could be very demeaning, and they would treat you almost as though you have no value, you're not really human. And you'd be surprised that Malaysians in prison, in the women's prison at least, get worse treatments than the non-Malaysians.
Oh.
Yeah.
But why? Like, was there a reason?
For some reason, they would just, well, at least while I was there, they would just taunt us Malaysians and like, oh, and also maybe because the foreigners had their embassies to back them up and check up on them.
Yeah.
And those guys were allowed to come into the prison, actually come into the prison, not just the visiting areas. So maybe that was also why they had more privileges. Like, for example, they're allowed to buy more food. Like our expenditures when your family comes, you're only allowed to spend 50 ringgit.
Like your family can only spend 50
can only spend 50 ringgit. So even if they wanted to, they couldn't buy you everything that you wanted.
Oh.
But like the foreigners would be allowed like 100, 200 ringgit budget.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there is some sort of inequality within the system as well. I mean, for sure, right?
Other than that, medical treatment was really poor. They would lot in people with TB with people who don't have TB.
TB?
Tuberculosis.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was bad. And then there was no proper space for people with HIV, although they're separated. But there were times where, you know, we have fights and then they like, oh, I'm going to cut myself, cut you, and then I'm going to give you HIV. So that was like really scary for me.
That's of course. I mean, I mean, you don't want to end up. I think that's the thing, right? Like, research has shown that a lot of these people that were in prison before, their mental well-being, their physical health well-being is a lot more worse compared to before they were in prison because of situations like this. There's no proper facilities. There's no proper healthcare in there that is provided to them.
Yeah.
Right. And it's heartbreaking because especially during a time of COVID, I mean, it's grateful that you were already out then, but I cannot imagine like what it's like in prison for those during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Did you hear any stories or?
No.
No, okay. Are you still in touch with any of?
I'm in touch with one or two.
One or two.
Yeah.
Like they will also release eventually.
Yeah.
Okay, thank goodness. I think really guys, the reason why we're also here today, before I go further with Liyana, is the issue of prison overcrowding. And Liyana experienced it firsthand that she didn't get the proper facility and that there's just utter shit in there. Lack of a better word, utter shit in there. And here's some fun fact for you guys that across Southeast Asia's prisons, jails, and other settings of mandatory detention, such as the IDC, which stands for Immigration Detention Center, or mandatory drug rehab centers, are overflowing. And when we talk about overflowing, on average, jails and prisons in the region are operating at 150 to 200% over capacity. And according to the World Prison Brief, Malaysia has a prison occupancy rate of 142.3%. And as of last year, November 2020, the number of prisoners in Malaysia stood at 65,139 individuals. And this is around 40% more than the intended capacity, which is only about 46,420 individuals. So, guys, just looking at the numbers is so clear that prison overcrowding is more pressing than ever, and especially during a time like a pandemic. People who are incarcerated are particularly vulnerable and are at great risk of sickness and death. During your time in there, Liyana, were there people who unfortunately passed on because of the lack of health support and all that?
Yeah. There was an inmate. She had AIDS, but that was not why she passed. Mm-hmm. There's a little advice that everyone receives when they go in, which is not to eat the meat when they have meat.
Meat, like when you're served meat.
Yeah, when you're served meat, because everyone's like, it's not washed properly.
Oh my God.
So most often, everyone will get food poisoning. So there was once that it was really bad that the whole prison got food poisoning. And they just gave us like pandan leaves to tie on our door cells for the smell, because everyone had to use the bathroom. Yeah. And so this lady who was down with HIV, I guess her body couldn't take it. Yeah. And she passed in her cell.
And how old was she?
She was in her early 40s.
So young.
She has been inside for a while waiting her trial. I think she was inside for 3 years waiting trial.
My goodness.
So she still wasn't sentenced when she passed.
And she was also in there for a very minor crime?
She was in there for drug trafficking.
Drug trafficking. Okay. Oh my goodness, guys. Sorry. I find sometimes I'm at a loss of words a lot of the times just listening to stories like that. Well, now that you're out, Liyana, do people view you differently, see you differently, and what was that like for you?
There definitely are some friends that I no longer speak to.
Because of that experience?
Yeah. I feel like they've chosen to distance themselves probably for whatever reasons. It's fine. But yeah, it's definitely hard because you do lose some friends, I guess, and get judged.
Yeah. And also a lot of the times there's this, what's the word? Misconception or like perspective or this idea that you're in prison, therefore you are a dangerous criminal, therefore I should stay away from you. But the truth is, they're all human, like I said, and just having Liyana here with us, she was a woman who so happened to be incarcerated, who had that experience, does not mean she's a dangerous criminal. right? Like, what's
I'm not a dangerous
exactly
criminal.
exactly like why do people just have this perception that just because you were in prison, now you're dangerous? So how do you cope with that, Liyana?
I think it's something that I just have to go through and take day to day until society changes their mind about this, about their view on people who have been incarcerated. I think it's something that I'll always just sort of be there and I'll just have to go through.
Yeah. Yeah, and the thing is, a lot of these people that were incarcerated were actually taken in for very minor drug offenses. Like for yourself, you were just found with a very small dose of your marijuana.
Yeah.
And at the time, you didn't know that it's such a big crime, and then you found out, and 2 years of your lives was taken away. And 2 years is a very, very long time. Like just this pandemic alone took away 2 years of our lives, but we still got to live it in the outside world. But Liyana did not have that privilege. 2 years was stolen from her just like that, from a system that is so flawed. And I think that's why you are here, and that's why you want to speak up for the rest who had that experience, and kind of like bring awareness to this situation of overcrowding prison. And so having witnessing it yourself, like what do you think needs to be changed with the existing judiciary system, and why do you even think it's happening?
I think our current judiciary system is archaic. It's too old. It doesn't work anymore. Locking people up does not solve any societal problems, actually. So it would be better if we had some sort of like alternative sentencing. Another way someone can be punished for their crimes if they have indeed done it. And maybe one is not to have people on remand for a very long time. You know,
does that make sense?
You haven't been found guilty yet, so why are you serving a prison sentence?
Yeah,
that's what I feel. So maybe with like different ways that alternative sentencing would be better. Like, you know, you can do work, give back to society. That helps in
community
building
work,
in building people. So instead of bringing them down, you give them a chance to change.
Yeah. Really, I think that is so important, which is why we want you guys, if you have the time, please go watch the documentary. Again, it's called It's Time for Alternative, and it will be out on the 21st of January. Again, if it's still not out yet, do stay tuned and look out for it when it's out. Again, details will be in the description down below. Of course, how do you think we can be part of the change? Like, I think this episode probably caught a lot of our listeners by surprise. It's not something that we normally talk about because a lot of us are not aware that this is even an issue. So how can we be part of the change when we are not aware?
I think one of it is definitely to now be aware and be mindful of maybe people you know who have been inside, give them a second chance, and definitely support people who are working towards prison reformation and changing the ways we punish people.
Yeah. And here are a couple of facts that I really want to share is that an estimated of 2/3 of inmates in Malaysian prisons are actually convicted for drug-related offenses, but a lot of times are very minor drug offenses.
Yeah.
And according to Dr. Siva Kumar, the consultant psychiatrist, he said that public medical officers would immediately consider that a suspected drug user to be dependent on drugs, means addicted to drugs, even if the result comes back positive, even if it's the suspect's first time ever trying drug. So there's this generalization that you are an addict just because you're tested positive, right? And as for drug possession, a small amount of non-hardcore drugs such as marijuana could also land a person in prison, like what happened to you, Liyana. And today, imprisoned drug offenders could include everyone from traffickers, or if you are convicted for possession of drugs, and those who happen to be tested positive for drugs in urine. It really doesn't take much for you to be sent to prison. And it's very unfortunate because, like you said, a lot of them don't deserve to be in prison. Instead of locking them up, you can educate them and tell them that, hey, this is what you can do instead. Because I don't know, what good are we doing to these people who are in prison, locking them up without just making any change? But I feel like even if you come out without the support system that you have, you might be worse or just the same, right?
It's almost like creating a cycle itself. Like you go in, nothing changes. You go out, it's the same thing.
This vicious cycle that is just not going to change anything. Well, that's why I guess we are here having this conversation today, even though it's a very tough one. It's a very uncomfortable conversation. But Liyana, I just want to say thank you so much, for even opening up with your experiences. I'm sure it's hard to like relive and having so many people listen to it. And so we talked about alternative sentencing. So it really just offer people more chances at rehab and reducing the recidivism. Like she said, breaking the cycle is so important. It's really just a different form of punishment. Yes, you are still telling them, hey, you are wrong, you should be punished, but not in a way where the prison does.
Yeah, not in a way that's detrimental to their personal growth.
Yeah, because these people, like you said, that like when Liyana was in there, she was still in her 20s, mid-20s only. Yeah. You still have your life ahead of you. And I just think it's not fair that I cannot imagine it happening to someone so close to me. And I don't know. It feels so helpless. I'm pretty sure it was that way for your family.
Yeah. So it's not only that the people who get incarcerated that suffers, it's obviously the families as well that pay a price.
What was it like for your parents while you were incarcerated? Did they ever
It was
share?
hard for my dad, and I think even harder on my youngest sister because she was 4 when my mom passed. So I was really her caretaker.
Oh man.
So and to have her grow up and spend her weekends visiting me inside, it's just not fair.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm so sorry that you guys have to go through that. But I'm so glad that you're finally released and out here living life again. As women, we all live lives, and we've been given the narrative of the importance of being pure, quote unquote pure. And even more so when religious views are attached to it. So when someone who has been a part of the system re-entering the society can be difficult. And Liyana briefly mentioned that re-entering, doing that was even harder than her time in prison.
Yeah.
So perhaps, do you mind, like, what was the toughest for you, apart from having your friends distancing themselves? Very grateful that you have your boss being so supportive, but what was the hard like?
I think before actually going back to my boss, I didn't dare go back to him, maybe because I was embarrassed, because I did tell him instantly when it happened, what had happened. So I tried getting a job elsewhere. So I actually applied at Google.
Okay.
But I didn't pass the background check. And it was because in the system it says that I've been to prison.
Yeah.
So regardless if you're acquitted of the charges or you've been sentenced, like there's still a record, and that's hard to get over. Yeah.
And when you finally went to your boss, what was that conversation like, if you don't mind sharing?
That conversation was really almost me hitting rock bottom outside, like not knowing what to do. And my passion was always within production. So I said, I have to at least give it a try.
Yes.
So I had that hard conversation with him and he was completely fine. So it was me overthinking it, but that's also a part of what I go through after I left prison, is that always questioning and second guessing myself.
For sure, I can only imagine the guilt, the shame, the trauma that just comes along with it, and it's so hard to unpack.
Right.
And do you go to therapy now, or do you have someone who helps you when you are, going through?
I don't, but when I first left, I did join a therapy group for ex-inmates. But I felt that they were actually going through much harder times than myself because I had an actual real support system at home.
Yeah.
So I felt like I'm not going to take their shine. Like they need this more than me. So I excused myself and then I just got through it on my own with the support of my family and friends.
But how are you now, Liyana? Like how it's been 6 years and having to talk about it earlier with me, like how are you feeling?
I'm feeling it's a lot. Like I haven't spoken about it like in a while besides when I did the documentary.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're so strong. Can I just say thank you for even being here. I think I said that many times, but I really mean it from the bottom of my heart and our hearts, the team. Very
You're
grateful
welcome,
for
guys.
yeah. Thank you for being here. I can see Bella just kind of like touching her chest, and because it's such a heavy conversation. And so guys, if you're listening to this, I hope that we will be one of those people who will be kinder to people. We will be kinder to those who, especially those who were in the system before. And if you one day ever encounter and meet someone who was once a part of the system, be kind to them, ask them questions, talk to them instead of, shying them away, because they are human too. So having Liyana here today really shifted my perspective, your story as well. Sorry, I'm like choking up because, yeah, it's hard. So it's really important for us to stand together and really challenge the narrative, because if we are adopting this toxic mindset, it's just so unfair and it's just not right? And if we are always the one pointing fingers, when can we change? When will change come? And it's just going to be, like you said, a vicious cycle for the next generation after generation. And hopefully, with us starting this conversation here today and even having Liyana in person sharing her personal experience, would shift and challenge your perspective on the idea of overcrowded prisons and people who, like I said, has been a part of the system, and why it's so important for us to advocate for alternative sentencing. And if you're someone who are able to do something, go speak up. If not, share the word, spread the word. And yeah, and I guess before we wrap up, Liyana, is there anything you want to share with our listeners that maybe I didn't have the chance or didn't get to ask, but you wanted to talk about?
I think let's all just be human and kind to each other. That's the least that we can do.
Amen to that. And like I said, Ming Han and Ming Yu, they will also be talking to the director who also had some firsthand experiences talking to Liyana and coming up with this documentary. Again, it's called It's Time for Alternative. Check it out on their pod. But today, we're just so grateful to have Liyana here to share with us her story. And yes, like she said, be kinder. We're all human. So if we're not here for each other, who would, right? And you can actually be a part of the change and do something about it if you feel like there's something you want to do today, apart from sharing this podcast on your socials. If you can also sign the petition at www.pilihpeluang.my. Click on the link. It's also in our description down below. There's a lot of write-ups and things that you should know before you even go further into this conversation. And yeah, sign the petition if you can. I've done it myself. And let's hope that, we can see change in years to come. Like, let's be honest, we know that change won't come so soon, or it's not as easy as saying, hey, we want to change, we sign a petition, therefore change can happen. But hopefully by continuously talking about this, bringing light to this topic, we can change the narrative for the future generation. And with that, we'd like to wrap up the episode. Again, we have Liyana here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. We can't wait to see more of you. And yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. And like I always say, don't forget to fall head over heels for yourself first and always, and in this case, for other people too. Be kind, stay safe, take care. Bye-bye.